you keep listening, hey, build me X, you'd always be one step behind. So you kind of also need to balance out some bets which are maybe ahead of what someone might directly ask you for. Um, so it's, I think, around this 1 to 10 or 1 to 100 stage is also where I feel the nature of senior product management changes.
Hi guys, today we have Prateek Gupte. He is the founder of Relove, a company helping fashion brands with their technology stack to resale. He's also my ex-boss. I reported back at Haptik. He was the VP of product at Haptik, the largest conversational AI platform in India. He was a visionary leader, to say the least. Think of building a smart talking mirror. I would say the most customer backward person that I've worked with. No frills, no nonsense. Looking forward to an interesting episode, guys. So, Pradeep, welcome to the podcast.
Hey everyone, hey Nikunj, thanks for having me.
All right. So, Pradeep, how is your life running a startup? I understand being into a job, full-time stresses of a job compared to now you running like a startup from 0 to 1. And how's your life day to day in general now? Yeah.
Yeah, life I think is super crazy hectic right now. I think we also just recently became a dad, so it's been a crazy last few years. But it's been, I can't imagine it any other way. I've gotten so used to that uh, 0 to 1 journey or the startup hustle, so to speak, that it feels odd when that stress is not there. So I think I'll need a lot of therapy later, but uh, but it's a fun kind of stress, yeah.
So, Prateek, first of all, thank you so much for talking to us, and congratulations on becoming a dad. Just extending to what you said, right? 0 to 1 is always very fascinating. So, drawing from your experience at Haptik, I'm assuming when you joined Haptik, you would have done a lot of 0 to 1 initiatives. I remember back in the days, Haptik was a B2C app, and then you guys pivoted to a B2B product, right? And again, similar to what you're doing currently, I think you are currently in a 0 to 1 phase or probably just beyond that. So as a product leader, how do you approach, building products in a 0 to 1 phase, right?
So yeah, I think, I remember when I just joined Haptik at that point in time, I didn't really have a role in mind that I want to join for, like, because I had done a bit of like the sweet spot between product and engineering is kind of where I like to sort of live at. So when I joined and I spoke to Akhil also, he was like, listen, don't worry about the role, don't worry about the title, just come and we'll see. And you just put your desk next to mine. And I think at that point already, it was like about a 300-person company. So he's just like, just come set up a desk next to mine and we'll figure stuff out. We'll do like, new initiatives and you can just title it special projects. And he said, "Aa jao, dekhte hain." And from that point on, I think it was a bit of find random things that were broken in the company and try and fix them to trying to take up new initiatives, new features, things that, sometimes in a company at that size already, they kind of things don't move as fast as you'd want them to. And I think Akrit was particularly feeling that pinch that, hey, I have an idea, but I have to go through XYZ channels to get it done. I want someone who can maybe just, bang it out in like a couple of days and show me something rough and that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I started at. It was a B2C company, like Nikunj said, and I worked on a lot of engineering related things to help that out. But I think one of the first few initiatives I took up was actually seeing whether the core technology that we had built out was something that was valuable to businesses. So I think that was my first product initiative. The rest I would call more like engineering-ish initiatives. And so we took that out and I started showing it to businesses that, hey, what would you want? Like, would there be something you'd be interested in? How would you use this? What would you think about? And I think when you think about it today and sitting in 2023, um, not thinking of the chatbot capabilities also we have today, not the large language models, but what you had back in 2016, 17, whenever, it was a lot more limited and it feels obvious that customer support automation, right, sitting right now. But back then, no one had a clue, right? I think it was like, do you want to build like a Siri type assistant? Do you want to build people using it for marketing, sales initiatives? So I think arriving at that and that whole journey then kind of also took Haptik along for that journey.
Thanks for that, Prateek. Prateek, I was speaking to Swapan yesterday just to get a pulse on his side of things. Obviously, I joined in very late. You were already the VP of product at Haptik. So you joined in as like a special projects leader, and then you transitioned to essentially leading product for Haptik end to end, right? So if you can sort of just walk us across how did that transition happen, and obviously I'll just add to that. I remember asking like a follow up to Swapan with respect to how did you like make that transition. So Swapan essentially was ki, in your first role, you used to speak to customers, and in terms of the way you led the team, and for him to have that conviction, you essentially did some work that made him sort of super confident that hey, you can lead the team, right? So that transition is super interesting for me to learn. I obviously did not know about it. I want to know how that big sort of shift happened.
So interesting one. I think there was like actually a step in between there. So from special projects, I went to like I said, I did a bunch of engineering initiatives. So I went from there to first director of engineering, and I was then looking at the whole engineering side of things without again looking too much at the product. So I think I revamped the entire DevOps initiatives. I set up a whole CI/CD pipeline. The entire cleaned up the way. I think there was even processes like getting in some sort of, I think at that point it was a bit disorganized in terms of how the teams were structured. So a lot of engineering management went in over there at that point as well. And so I got the director of engineering mandate first. And so I was looking at engineering across the board, and the product side of things. Like I said, I was it was also like a add-on, like, okay, hey, look at product for B2B. So, at that time, it was still largely a B2C company. So it was just like literally it was me and one sales guy. And then besides that, I was running the whole engineering division. So that was my product side was like maybe 20%. Like I spent that significant time there, but it was less about running the product team, so to speak. There was no product team, or they were more on the B2C side of things, coupons and discounts and those sort of things. Um, so that's how it started, and then eventually, sort of, as me and the salesperson, it was salesperson was Sid at that time, as we sort of closed deals and we started like bringing in business in, and slowly, people started noticing like, oh shit, this B2B business is starting to pick up. It's starting to like beat the B2C business with a fraction of the resources. And then they're like, okay, let's put one more salesperson. Okay, let's put some more engineering resources. Let's help get a delivery team together. And then I think the delivery team came first. And then it kind of evolved from there. Where I was, there was a delivery team also I was working. Then this. So it kind of evolved pretty organically, where over time I went from looking at engineering and product of B2B to, I think there was a phase in the middle where I was doing both product and engineering. And I think at that point it was like, I think it was a bit much in terms of a mandate, and it was like 100 plus people. And I was like, listen, I cannot efficiently do both. I think I had to sit down. I was like, I cannot like do justice to sort of looking at engineering properly as well as trying to like look at product end to end, right? And so then I had to like, it was actually a very tough decision. I remember uh, I had to like say I'm not gonna do engineering anymore, and sort of from a lot of people might look at it as, oh, your headcount actually shrunk from like 60 to 6. But like the mandate actually was a lot higher, where it went from now less of people management, but more about, looking at then the overall B2B product, which by that time was the full-fledged Haptik that we know today.
Thank you, Pradeep. Just segueing into when you then transitioned to be the VP of product, I understand like thinking of what the company is going after big bets, right? There are multiple directions. I remember like we were very big on going after languages, the Superman release. Then there was a time wherein we wanted to sort of go after IVR, right? These were big bets. Aptic was a chatbot company, now transitioning to build for voice, or let's say to be able to not just build English bots, also let's say support building native Indian regional language bots, right? Which is a very different, it's a can of worms to be honest, right? How do you sort of pick these big bets and build conviction around, obviously as a leader, I'm pretty sure your conversations with the leadership and you being able to confident, okay, let's go after ABC, right? How did that process frame up?
So yeah, I think there's like it went slowly. The company went from like a 0 to 1 stage to like more of a 1 to 10 stage, where you're kind of press a bit harder on what's working, and at that point you're not really sure where to press. And I guess that's why you're pressing around a bit. You're like, okay, it's like, what's the right market? What's the right size of customer? What is the right problem statements and persona I'm selling to? And I would say then the bets are kind of a little bit more contained in that region, where like, okay, someone wants to do customer support. Do I do like IVR with it, or do I do language is more like a region specific bet? Do I want to, what is the region I'm focusing on? So they did try and kind of go in a certain more specific direction. You're not kind of changing your entire business model, but you're trying to find some sort of competitive edge, because at that point, a lot of competitors also had started coming up, and there were companies like offering all of these things. So some of it's driven by the market. When you go and talk to customers, they'll tell you what you're looking for. Your salespeople will tell you, or they'll tell you why you're losing out on certain deals, and certain things which you kind of want to build out your differentiation on, right? Which you might not get as direct, hey, build me X. But sometimes if you keep listening, hey, build me X, you'll always be one step behind. So you kind of also need to balance out some bets which are maybe ahead of what someone might directly ask you for. Um, so it's, I think, around this 1 to 10 or 10 to 100, 1 to 100 stage is also where I feel the nature of senior product management changes.
Okay.
And it just depends from company to company. And maybe you can also share some of what you've seen at Swiggy and some of those insights. But I feel like, you know, the product management role starts to get, in essence, a little bit of a internal facing role aspect
Yeah.
to it, right? Where
Yes.
you gotta also kind of go around and build consensus within the company. Because now when you have a 300-person company, you have like a bit of a mid management layer. People have different views also.
Yes.
So that kind of becomes like an added layer of responsibility as the company grows, where your job as whatever CPO or VP of product or head of product, whatever it is, to build that internal level of consensus and make sure everyone's pushing in the right direction. So that kind of role I've seen kind of evolve. I can't imagine what it is like at a company like Swiggy. Is that something similar?
So for sure, I get what you're essentially gunning at, right? Generally, when you have over, let's say, 6 to 7 product managers, you're very top heavy, right? Your strategy for you, the tech bandwidth, you're not scaling at the same pace as the number of product or business leaders you're hiring. So as you get more and more leaders, everybody comes with their own biases and their own storytelling narratives of going after, okay, X, Y, and Z, because their personal experiences or their understanding of the market tells them to go after this. So one thing I can obviously for sure share is, so Swiggy is obviously now grown at a certain scale, and now for them, where does the next stage of growth, obviously, how do they grow beyond what they are today, the monster, right? So loyalty is a big bet. Obviously, Swiggy one, they're trying to sort of grow and grow sustainably. So internally, I've faced a lot of struggle trying to sort of sell certain ways of building the loyalty construct, right? Do you build like rewards kind of a construct? Do you build your loyalty for low frequency users who might not be super sticky on the Swiggy app? Or do you build loyalty only for your top 10%, your power users who are essentially ordering on Swiggy, let's say 6 to 8 times, right? Because essentially you want to increase your average revenue per user, but you cannot go in all directions. So internally, I remember my first 4 months was trying to figure out who the loyalty program was for. And we did a lot of things. In fact, even before I joined, Swiggy one was Swiggy Super. They had these sort of 3 different sort of tiers, right? Bit, Bite, and Binge. So that was from a very different chain of thought. And when we sort of merged everything into sort of one big program, we called it internally, the language was Jugular. But fundamentally, the program was essentially going after a certain TG. We called it like internally the Swiggy one TG, whom we are building the Swiggy one for. And that's when the idea was that there's a certain sort of cohort of users we want on the loyalty program. We do not want everyone. That's why if you've seen a lot of online social media backlash around differential pricing for memberships, right? So for Swiggy, essentially the idea was to giving the right pricing to the right sort of TG of users so that it's beneficial for them. It's obviously customer backward, but it comes across as it's not customer backward because the pricing is differential.
The
But
rewards are also different that way than for the pricing.
the rewards are standard, but
Okay.
essentially the idea is the savings that you make. For example, if on an average a Swiggy one member makes 2,000 rupees in the 3-month time frame, we are
Mm.
essentially not asking you to pay more than like 800, 900 bucks, right?
Mm.
The largest sort of priced membership construct. So we want to sort of be at that price, but we cannot be, because the nature of the e-commerce landscape in India, we cannot price a program at, if you look at other OTT platforms or any other subscription programs
Yeah.
out there, no one is beyond like 1,500 bucks, right? And even annually. So
Mm.
pricing a 3-month program beyond 900, it's obviously nonsensical. So the idea was, how do you increase the revenue while being very relevant to the user's context? So that's where the challenge was. So I totally get like growth. Do you get growth from loyalty? Do you get growth from obviously the new categories that Swiggy is going after? So that's like an internal struggle to being able to sort of prioritize, okay, this is the big bet. And then do you put all eggs in that one basket, or do you then sort of diversify?
Yeah, and like imagine so many different teams with their own thoughts, right? And I think like you can, I think one just thinking of subscriptions, I think Amazon did that pretty well. Where if you think about Prime, kind of transcends so many different products, and imagine like when someone top down probably came and told must have pissed off a lot of PMs across the board,
Yeah.
and it's kind of affecting the way, but like you have that larger vision, which then needs to kind of trickle down on a way, right? And I think that's a lot of where having strong product leadership is about. You have that story that you're selling, and everyone has to buy into it. And you're keeping one eye on actually your customer and whoever's really like focused and important for you, but the other eye is also kind of now on the internal alignment with everyone, right? And I think that's where the role starts to really evolve and get really tricky, and it becomes a lot of more, little bit more people management in a different way.
Right. So, Prateek, obviously, that's a very important keyword for me. People management, right? How do you structure product teams in general, and especially from a B2B context? How we had a platform team. In general, SaaS companies, there's like a delivery side product org, and there's a platform core product team that's building the product for itself, right? I understand there's like a transition from how the product team was structured at Haptik earlier. My sense is we did not have a larger delivery team. As we started sort of moving to the B2B worldview, we had to split that, right? How was that decision shaping up? And I want to truly understand the split also, because I understand creating those delivery pods. How do you hire and scale or have that visibility or predictability rather? Here, you'll need these many people in the delivery side of things. And on the platform also, how the products are now splitting, right?
Yeah. So that's a good question, and I think some of these things in org structure in general, I would say there's no like perfect thing. Like in the end, if you optimize for one thing or another thing gets challenged. If you optimize for compartmentalization, then communication is a challenge. Whereas if you make it too flat, then it's harder in another different way, right? So I think you kind of org structures are like always like a tricky thing to kind of get perfect. It's a bit of a trade-off you always make. But I think there's a bit of mm, I've seen in two, three sort of B2B setups where you have uh, sort of a core product which you're then tweaking for your enterprise to mid segment, and someone is then internally packaging it and delivering it, right? That sort of mid market to upper mid market B2B SaaS enterprise. So that's pretty sort of straightforward where you have a core product team, which is the goal of that is kind of to always insulate it from immediate customer demands. You want to have that team looking a little bit more, long term, give it a little room to sort of do quarter to quarter planning or whatever's your time frame at that point. And then there is a separate sort of delivery pod, which is kind of trying to package it and close customers and integrate it into their system or deliver sort of the end value, right? Um, I think that sort of distinction you see in a lot of companies that kind of do this, whether it's Clever Tap or like whoever of these guys that kind of do this. in a way, for this, the platform team's customer is the delivery boy, and at the same time, it's also the end customer.
Mm.
So it's got kind of two sets of audiences. And you'll hear like some common challenges across that, they tend to prioritize customers over delivery. You always prioritize external customers over internal customers, and those sort of things, again, you're constantly balancing as in when you grow. But yeah, I would say we had different product teams, but at Haptik, but I would not say we had different products. At the end of the day, we had like a product which had different sort of
Mhm.
aspects, and we kind of sold it. It got sold as one item. It was
Yeah.
not like a Zoho, which had like Zoho Books and Zoho CRM and Zoho XYZ. Those are very like properly different products with their own P&L, their own everything, right? And
Yeah.
you can kind of run those pretty independently. We were
Yeah.
still a single product company at the end of the day, I would say.
For sure. For
Got
sure.
it. Got it. So again, yeah, Nikunj, speak over it.
Yeah, just one question I want to just, since we are in the topic. So within the core platform team, right? How do you sort of allocate responsibilities? Because obviously I face this at my current company and Swiggy as well. Do you think of a PM being responsible for a certain cohort? Let's say you're going after new users, dominant users, or you're going after repeat users, or do you give a PM, let's say, the product altogether? Okay, hey, you will, let's say, look at agent chat, at how we sort of structure the teams at Haptik, right? There was PM for bot builder, that is the product to build the bots, and there was a
Hmm.
PM essentially for agent chat. I looked at agent chat, and essentially we used to sort of split the team at a product level, right? Because you
Hmm.
own the backlog for that product, and you essentially work with customer success and sales teams to figure out, okay, how does this sort of product now shape up 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line. So I think, how do you sort of juggle that? Because every company kind of approaches it differently. I think it's more a factor of scope, or do you see any other variables impact that like split?
Um, so I mean, I'll tell you my thought process, and I think, firstly, what you said about the way it was done at Swiggy makes a lot more sense for a B2C company for sure. Like, new customers, and you have someone looking at their entire journey end to end, and then they can work across different engineering teams if required, or that's its own sort of challenge. But I guess for it was a bit simpler also at a closed wall B2B company, which didn't have like, it's not like anyone could come in and sign up, right? They always came through a certain flow. So it's actually a lot simpler. I think people just looked at certain personas, like you said. There was one team that was looking at the end user experience, like when someone came and actually chatted with the bot, uh, how did that how did that sort of experience pan out for them, and that end user experience. Um, I think sometimes you got pigeonholed to, oh, that means you're working on only the client SDKs. So no, and then sometimes that role did expand to like working with the machine learning team to to get certain features out over there. So there is that bleed always. Um, but I guess you have like a home ground you sit in. The bot builder team focused on like the persona of the person building the bot. The analytics team focused on core sort of making the current customer success metrics, the right ones, visible to the end consumer. So in that sense, it had like a sort of value each person was trying to deliver. But yeah, I think it was I think easier given it was a closed wall B2B company.
Gotcha.
Got it. Got it. So yeah, as you said, talking about delivering value. So one thing we know, which Nikunj used to tell me during his Haptik days, was how you guys, championed the cause of OKRs, right? So probably drawing from your experience at Haptik and with your, current work experience as well at Relove. So how were you able to, let's say, establish the OKR framework within the organization, right? I'm asking this question because this framework is something which has eluded me, because wherever I've gone, I've never seen a formal, OKR framework, right? Obviously, all of us use certain format of evaluation or progress of a product and the product team, but from what Nikunj tells me, you guys followed it to the T, right? So how did you go about it, right?
Yeah, I think the the moment came up. I think when there was again, I think OKRs. By the way, we tried implementing OKRs at our Relove as well, and that just like a 10-person company, and and then at a 200% company. And I just saw the differences and things we realized. Um, I think so. Maybe I'll talk about Relove first because so what happened was I think the problem we were facing was different. It was I think a lot of people sometimes were unsure about how to contribute. So, we were obviously people had their day-to-day jobs and stuff like that, and they were working and
Hmm.
executing well. But supposing, there was like, we have a bunch of great team members who want to go above and beyond. They're like, hey, and they're not sure. They're like, should I work on this? I want to work, I want to spend my weekend hacking together something, and should I work on that? And they didn't have a thought process. They had the immediate task in front of them, but if they wanted to kind of take it to the next level at a 0 to 1 company, they didn't know like what direction should I go in. And I think the
Right.
OKR kind of like provided that framework to people to be like, hey, this is how you can add, say, additional value. If you're thinking of, hey, I want to increase revenue, maybe there's some things on the table which kind of you can pick up, or if you have some ideas that you want to implement, think in this direction. And then
Correct.
actually, kind of gave them sometimes when you want to be creative, setting up some boundary walls actually is better for creativity. But the mistake we made, I think, in such a early stage, small scale company was we planned for 3 months. And
Hmm.
by the sixth week, it was already out the door and everything was irrelevant. So I think now we brought it back down to like literally like 3 weeks or 1 month.
Correct.
I think we're trying that now. But again, I think people appreciate that sort of what are you thinking? Because as a founder, sometimes you're so in your head and you're trying to figure it out and not
Absolutely.
so clear.
Can you give an example of an OKR at Relove? Probably the 3 month, sorry, the 3 weeks thing which you guys have set.
Okay, so it was basically like a complete bet. I think one we did last month was they said we're going to run a quick pilot. We want to
Hmm.
validate whether, so just a quick recap, what we do, we basically provide, take back and resale solutions for e-commerce and digital brands, right? You might have seen those pretty commonly, like you mentioned, you can go return an item, you get something in return,
Correct.
and we manage either facilitating resale or what have you. So we thought, hey, the most sort of obvious model for this is a consumer to consumer sort of marketplace, like a full, like, like a ThreadUp or a Poshmark or something. There have been a couple of those, and our thing was to go brand first, but we're like, hey, let's see. So we just set up a quick 3 week OKR, let's run a pilot. And let's put this together. And we, then each team kind of took it on from there and said, okay, how do we do a quick validation? What can we achieve in 3 weeks? And then they were able to say, okay, hey, this is you're able to see the end outcomes of that also in 3-4 weeks. So it was a good sort of framework and pilot we ran. Again, it looks very different at a 0 to 1 company versus a larger company. But yeah, you could have done this without an OKR framework, but again, having that created some semblance of order to the whole thing.
Got it.
Understood, understood. With your 0 to 1 journey, since we are discussing in Relove, right? I'm pretty sure you must have come across like a series of problems, right? If you would want to sort of just pick certain problems that you are still sort of close to, and maybe you are still solving it, but just trying to understand how it will be super fruitful for new founders who would want to understand the 0 to 1 journey, and certain calls that you might have taken in hindsight that, hey, only if I had known this, I would have not done this, right? These kind of situations, if you can.
Ooh, so yeah, I think the 0 to 1 journey is a huge roller coaster, and I think it comes with so much like day-to-day uncertainty. And I think if only you're someone who's comfortable with that, comfortable with failure and rejection, can you kind of play in this sort of space, right? I think of uh, otherwise, most startups also choose to hire once they're a little bit past that, and once you have some level of proof in the pudding. But yeah, it can be a lot of fun also. So I think um, a couple of things I've learned is you want to try and keep your experiments and your failures as short as possible. I think sometimes, and that's I think the tricky one. Sometimes you keep asking yourself, hey, am I giving up too early on this particular idea that I have? And is it right? Because you hear all these things like, hey, you need perseverance, you need to grind it out for X number of years, and then only you will see the fruits of your labor. versus a lot of times, the writings in there that like, this is not going to work. I think that's the biggest sort of challenge you have. Like, is it a function of you not trying hard enough to make something work versus just, you got to move on to the next thing. And I think it's always the toughest call to make. I think knowing when to like say, okay, on to the next. Either it could be like a different idea completely. It could be a different business model. It could be a market. It could be a certain type of product feature or whatever, right? Which was this thing. But I think that's one of the toughest journeys, and I think some people go to the opposite extremes, where like you're just going at it for years, you burn through all your money, and then you're done. Or matlab, like every week it's a new idea. Like I think neither of those is good.
But I totally like resonate with that Parik. See, essentially you're too close to the problem. It's like sunk cost fallacy, or maybe
Yeah.
you don't want to doubt yourself because either you're compensating for like confidence that hey, I want to do this to like just make sure I run it for like 1 year, and if it works, it works. Is it like you try to time bound that experiment? Hey, this particular sort of initiative, I'll give it like X number of months, or is it more a factor of how do you like gauge those signals that hey, this is not working? From a product lingo, it's what we say product market fit, right? Whether the product is right, the timing is wrong, or the market is not giving you the right signals. So like what is that sort of framework if you have something?
Yeah, these frameworks, so there's so many out there and there's so many books you can read, but like it's just a different world when you actually do it. So like you'll see so many people who come with me, like they'll vomit out like all these mock tests and all this. They've read all the books, they've done it all, they know it, but they've not done a startup of their own. They've just been commentators. It's different, yeah, and like I wish you could get that proof in like I said, and uh, the thing is, product market fit is not like a binary situation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're not going to end up with like, acha, ho gaya, and like a light bulb ding. Like, it is like a gradient. It's like a 0 to 1 gradient. It feels like you have it, it's 1%, 2% to like everything, and then it keeps shifting.
Correct. It's always a moving goalpost, right?
Yeah. So you know, it's not like something you have. It's like it's degrees. Like you're like, okay, I feel like I have and it could be I feel like I have the product fit. Maybe the market's wrong. You try and shift the market, and then you try and shift the product. Like there's so many variables there. Um, but yeah, I think there's really no easy answer. Like, and you realize once you get sink your teeth in, you'll realize, right? I think
Correct.
so. We've put out a bunch of products in the sustainability space, and it's been such a tricky space to validate. So this is something again not there in any of the books, right? And they tell you to go ask your customers, talk to them whether you want something. But it's now when it comes to sustainability, it just doesn't work because no one, and I mean not a consumer, not an end user, not like a brand, not a business, no one will tell you I don't want to do sustainability. सब बोलेंगे हाँ 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 बढ़िया like we should save the planet like but the proof in the pudding is like when will they give you the money and not even when will they sign the agreement.
Absolutely.
I've
Correct.
had like companies sign agreements with me and then when it comes to giving you the money it doesn't happen. So like this has been such a tricky space to validate and I don't blame
Correct.
anyone. I think people want to do the right thing,
Yeah.
but when it boils down to them, I think you have to peel back their own layers of motivation,
Yeah.
because they want
Right.
to say that I want to support sustainability, I want to do the right thing, but when it comes push to shove, we've had to always build it out and say ki paisa do. नहीं तो नहीं तो it does you just can't validate it, and that's been I think over the last 2 years like a fresh learning for me.
Thanks, Prateek. I think the last 1 minute were the highlight of this episode for me. I genuinely laughed. This was not scripted for sure. Cool. So one last question. I understand obviously you've been hiring over the years at Haptik also, but especially from your Relove journey, right? Because when you hire for a startup, you're not just looking for skills, you're also looking for like certain type of talent who will obviously go over and above, and you would want that person to not just be tasked with like a very specific area ki, hey, you do this, right? You want like a jack of all trades kind of person. When I speak to founders, and Ankit and I have also tried to hire for PM schools over the last like 3.5 years, and we have struggled. There's attrition. People will leave you after 3 months because they are motivated by some like different sort of variables. Did you like have like a maybe you might not have like when you started, but right now if you hire, do you have, hey, this person should have like ABC, and what are your sort of controllables and not uncontrollables when you hire for people like across different profiles?
So yeah, I think it's like order of three and like aptitude, culture, skills in that order.
Okay.
So like, do you have the aptitude for the job? Are you the right sort of cultural fit? And the last for me is skills. Like skills in the end, I believe you can always pick up, you can always learn. But the first two sort of you can't really uh, teach, or you can't
Train
fix.
them. Yeah.
Got it.
So it's in that order, and I think we've started out as a remote company, still a remote company. And I think that over there, I feel especially over the last few years, integrity, I think, is it's part of culture, but I think it's so hard. Like we're seeing so many
Right.
people moonlighting, doing multiple jobs, and it's, I mean, I'm more than happy you be transparent with me and you work this out with me. But in the end, if you don't know, and it's harder to say what someone's doing with their day, right? So we look at primarily output. If the output's happening, then it's all good. But in the end, it can add like a layer of management overhead where which is not there in the office, right? It's easier, I think, some things. Um, but yeah, we're at that stage, I think, where we put together a great team. I think we barely had anyone leave us, maybe like one or two people. We still stringently sort of interview, and it's pretty like almost like 50, 60 people per role easily.
Nice.
And yeah,
How
and I
big is
think,
the? Sorry, please go ahead.
no, so yeah, we're about a dozen people right now. It's still very lean, and I haven't even hired a first product manager. I think it's still too early for that. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
too early for me to even let go of that little control and give it to someone and say, okay, because it's changing so quickly, it's changing so rapidly, it would be like wrong to hire a product manager now and expect that person to come in and figure out this 0 to 1 journey. It doesn't happen.
Nice. Just on the last part, when do you realize you need a product manager? Because I get this question a lot when we speak to like fellow co-founders, or let's say people who come to us with, hey, you're running PM school, can you help us with this particular problem? Do you think we need to hire? And when we send them our candidates, they then later realize that, hey, this does not work out, right? So do you like have like a marker that, hey, when my engineering side is X, or it's obviously more about the product as well, how nuanced or technical the product is? You need someone to manage the engineering team, because product management is also like very a generalist role, to be very honest.
Hmm. So, I mean, just a quick answer to that. First, having someone to manage your engineering team is the wrong time to hire a product manager right off the bat. That's not the person's job if you're looking for that. So that is when you need to hire maybe like an engineering manager.
Mm.
But I would say a little bit, dig a bit deeper into sort of where you're at and what's your real challenge right now. Are you looking for someone to sort of just help you, like, do a bit of, let's be honest, do a bit of run around, and
Right.
you're looking for someone to help you, run through some data, or filter through some stuff, and you just need kind of maybe like a product analyst or someone who's going to help you kind of crunch some numbers or help you be like your right hand to make some decisions, right? At that point, be clear, like you want someone who's like an analyst. um I would say hiring, firstly, I don't think it's easy to be a product manager with like 0 to 2 years experience. If you want to be like an actual card holding product manager where you're actually having full ownership of building features, you need like at least that like 5 to 6 years experience, right? And as someone who's hiring, I would not hire until I'm ready to let go of those decisions. And when I reach a point where, okay, I'm now the business is growing, I need to focus on maybe some other stuff, then and I don't have the correct time or bandwidth to kind of allocate to making the correct product decisions, and I'm not spending enough time there, then that's probably when I'll go and say, okay, I need to make my first proper PM hire, someone who's actually gonna have some ability. Because otherwise, just getting someone to run the team and the day-to-day job and the sprints for you, that's not really a PM to me. That's more like a team lead or something, or like an engineering manager. That's a very different problem.
Thank you, Prateek. I guess I'm done with everything we wanted to cover. Ankit, if you have anything.
No, thank you so much, Prateek, for a very insightful first episode, I would say. And
Yeah.
No, happy I could pop your cherry guys on this one, and looking forward to it.